Let me tell you something. Every single company whose subscriptions you pay for today is spending more on AI now than ever before. Now, everybody thought smarter products, more features, faster features will lead to more revenue. Yet, the API bills this year especially has hit the tens of billions of dollars. And yet, none of those companies that spent that money can point to AI being the reason for more revenue. And almost nobody wants to talk about why. So I asked Yuriy Timen, who's seen this from inside of more billion-dollar companies than anybody else.
The reality is that 85% of Americans have neutral to negative views on AI.
Advised companies like Brex, Canva, Airtable, Flow, AG1, some of the best consumer software companies out there. And the question was simple. If AI makes products better, but the consumer does not want to pay more for those products, what the hell did you just spend billions of dollars on? And his answer, well, was nothing short of shocking. Let's get into it. Yuriy, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Arnav.
Yuriy is sitting in a cabin somewhere on some undisclosed location.
Undisclosed location, right.
Undisclosed location with a Starlink sync up. So I appreciate you taking out the time and being here, Yuriy.
My pleasure. If it weren't for Elon.
True. I mean, if anything, that's the one person that a lot of people have to thank for, whether it's the IPO, Starlink, SpaceX. It's funny how many things one person can do and be successful at.
Yeah.
But for the uninitiated who don't know Yuriy, I mean, is there any SaaS company that you use on a daily basis that Yuriy hasn't advised or worked with? I'd be surprised. And obviously, Yuriy has been instrumental at the growth that Grammarly has, which I'm sure you guys, if you're watching this podcast, also use in some capacity. So Yuriy, really the first thing I want to get into is with a lot of SaaS companies at the moment, we're calling it the SaaS apocalypse, right? And I'm somewhere in the middle where I don't really know what to believe because I have these AI companies telling me, oh, SaaS is dead. I have gurus on Instagram, more specifically, telling me, do not build a SaaS company or, it's Armageddon. And then there is a third, more nuanced perspective towards that, which is also playing out in the market is, yes, there are SaaS companies that are dying, but some have actually rebounded and are doing better than expectations. So in this spectrum of SaaS apocalypse, for any founder watching this that wants to build a SaaS company, what is your advice to them? What are you talking to them about?
Yeah, I mean, I do, from my vantage point, I do think that the SaaS apocalypse narrative is certainly overhyped. I think there are a few. Maybe let's just start with what are the key drivers of that narrative, right? I mean, the primary driver is basically everybody will build their own, right? Like, why do I need to buy? I can build it. It's a lot easier. It's a lot faster, and it's going to be exactly the way I need it and the way I want it. The second driver of the narrative, I would say, is around just kind of consolidation. That a tool that I used to buy for A and another tool I used to buy for B, with kind of AI-enabled development, like my tool A will be able to do the job to be done of tool B. I would say on the first driver, this is what my engineering software developer friends tell me, right? Is that AI is incredible at shipping code, but it's still quite lousy at software architecture. You cannot vibe code a Salesforce, right? And can you ultimately build something like a Salesforce faster? Perhaps. So if Salesforce took 30 years, maybe you can do it in 10. Right. And by the way, Arnav, are you still there? Because your video is completely frozen.
Yeah, I'm here. It's recording.
Okay. All
happens sometimes. No worries.
Okay, no worries. Yeah. So I think it's largely overhyped. My advice to founders who are thinking of starting a SaaS company, the first question that I would ask is it in an industry or a vertical that you feel has gotten stale, where you see a window of opportunity and you don't see any of the incumbents moving fast enough to seize it. And that has been the case with founding SaaS companies like all along, right? That's not new to the AI world, right? You look at your landscape, you see where the window of opportunity is, and you think if your, skill set, initiative, whatever is well aligned with seizing that opportunity. So now you basically just have an extra accelerant, right? Is being able to get to a proof of concept, be able to get to perhaps PMF faster because of how quickly you can iterate. So I would say that the decision calculus is not that different. It's just that there are maybe spaces that you wouldn't be willing to touch before because you would need too much runway to get to that V1 or something like that, right? Whereas here today, you can do that a lot faster. And maybe the other thing, right, given that AI companies and let's call it new age SaaS, right, are all moving toward usage or outcome based billing. I think that's another lens that you should look at the space in and say, okay, is there enough of a, let's call it, variance in value realization, right? Where I may have, where, there is a segment of the market where once usage or outcome based billing is enabled, that's a segment that's willing to spend, I don't know, 5, 10, 20x my average customer or my average subscriber, right? And where that exists, that would go in the pro column of like, okay, maybe this is worth starting.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I will definitely get into like productized service companies or like product companies becoming service companies and also how Superhuman is approaching it. But before that, one thing I'm really curious to know that is kind of attached to this is, are there any growth loops or growth machines that were just not possible to make or run 3 years ago that now with AI are possible that you can do other than efficiency gains? Is there like a disruption, so called, in the growth cycle for SaaS companies mostly?
Yeah, so there are a couple of vectors that we're seeing emerge. One vector is maybe this is, you tell me if this sounds more like efficiency, but if you take just the performance marketing engine, right, and you think about all of the different aspects from generating data insights to creative development to campaign architecture to bid management to budget allocation, all of those processes, we typically have stitched them together, right? We've been able to create some level of automation, maybe hack together some decision making, etc. But they're still, to do them well, right? To do them well, like, yeah, you can of course launch a Google PMax campaign, set it and forget it, right? And but the reality is that if you really want world class results, there is no at scale world class performance marketing engine that's spending more than, I don't know, 10-15% of its budget on PMax, right? And really, a lot of the performance comes from having better control, right? And having more of a human in the loop. And I think what we're seeing right now, with Claude Code or Perplexity, right, is that you're able to take, like, if you're a world class expert, you're able to take your process, describe it to an LLM, right? Brainstorm with it as a thought partner on how you can build an agentic process, right? That basically kind of clones your decision making rubric, right? And figure out where you still want to be involved, right? That's like actually like a big pro tip, right? Is that you don't start by saying, by describing your process to the LLM and then like letting it run with it. It's gonna make mistakes, right? And so you first want to have yourself in the loop. You kind of treat it almost like a junior employee at first. Where would you want to have a say, right? And a chance to approve, coach, veto a junior employee, right? And that's how you start with the process. All of a sudden, there is a productivity gain in that I just hired a junior employee. But the beautiful thing about LLMs is that person, that junior employee can progress through their career much faster, right, than a human junior employee could. This may be a little bit of a controversial thing to say. Sorry for apologies in advance to all the recent grads. We could also talk about that and and how to differentiate yourself on the job market. I have some thoughts there as well. But very quickly you say, okay, as you give it pointers, okay, I would do this here, I would do that there. You see that it gets progressively smarter, right? And then you can start removing it just like you would with a person who's progressing in their career. You say, okay, you know what? I don't need to approve this anymore. Go ahead and ship without me, right? And before you know it, you're only involved at a few critical junctures. So what that does is that just allows you to have a ridiculously faster learning loop, and then you can go on and architect new growth motions, etc. Okay, so that's kind of point A. Point B is this one is tactical. I know you asked for tactical, right? Is creative development. I mean, like what you can do with creative engines today, from feeding them in real time performance insights from your ad platforms, right? Pairing it with ongoing competitor research, like real time competitor scraping, right? Being able to deduce what's performing and why, right? Pair it together with your proprietary customer research, have it generate hypotheses, right? Have it generate visual proof of concepts, right? All the way to the final creative that gets pushed into the ad platform. And we know that as the ad platforms basically take away most of our controls, right? If you've been in this game long enough, you remember the days when, you could control every dial, right? And now it's like, hey, all we want you to tell us is your CPA target, right? And your budget, and load in the creative, and we're going to do the rest because we're way smarter than any of your people ever could be, right? And that creates this sort of, I would say, commoditization and kind of reversion to the mean. And so one of your remaining levers for differentiation is creative, the strength of your creative, right? That's one thing that the platforms still don't do. They don't like produce creative on demand. And then so if it's the strength of your creative, that's going to be one of your biggest differentiators. So then like, listen, like creating strong creative, some of it is intuition, of course, right? But if I can get 100 times more creative out there than you can, right? And that means I can get my feedback loop is going to be 100 times faster than yours, then I'm more likely to win on that one remaining dimension that matters, right? And what AI does right now in accelerating creative development and generation of creative insights is, I think, is pretty darn cool.
Are you like using something like that at Superhuman and
Yeah,
testing it
yeah,
out?
and we are, and so we actually have a kind of like a tiger team or a crack team, right? That is composed of like channel managers, MLE engineers, and just other. I call them kind of like AI growth accelerators. That's like a term that I coined. I think that's an emergence that we're seeing is like because the thing is the thing with AI, especially in any kind of like fast running organizations, especially if you're more of an established company, is that if you have aggressive goals, if you have a team you're managing, if you have a bunch of cross functional stakeholders, it's kind of difficult. It's non trivial to find time to get really good at AI, right? We're talking about not just, chatbots, right? We're talking about building true agentic workflows that can like replace, I don't know, a big chunk of your day to day. And to do
I want
that,
to.
yeah, go on.
Sorry to interrupt you, but
No,
I
no,
want to
anytime.
understand something on that specifically. Is the narrative, and like this isn't like new information to anybody, that you know there is a speed gain, there's an efficiency gain, there's definitely from a performance marketing perspective. I think that's where AI has been the most successful because you just get to do output at a crazy level that was just not possible before. What I think about, and maybe it hasn't played out in the market yet, but I do think about it, is what about there must be a marginal utility to the volume of output that you're doing. One. And the second part attached to that is if it's a tactic or it's a strategy that all of your competitors start doing. So let's say you're doing 1,000 ads and spending 100K on performance marketing in a month. And then your competitors can do that as well because they're also, you're in a hyper competitive market and everybody starts to do that. In that case, wouldn't it make sense that you would want to have people that intricately understand performance marketing, a human being in that loop, driving it forward and using their intuition to beat the competition? Because while AI is brilliant at generating output, and good output for that matter as well, but they don't have the intuition to know, yes, I'm generating output, but how am I exactly going to place it in a way that's going to be better than my competition?
100%, which is why the best, I feel like the companies and the teams and the case studies that show the most promise using AI have really strong domain experts in the loop. 100%, right? Like, because I think one of the most underrated aspects of AI is the kind of up leveling in your strategic thinking that you can do, right? And a lot of it comes from knowing how to use AI, right? There are a lot of there are a lot of like when I open up my, Claude Cowork and I want to design a new process, right? I start by asking it, how would you do it? Right? But because I am, or assuming I'm a domain expert, or at least I know enough to be dangerous about the thing that I'm trying to build, right? I'm able to course correct and have a real dialogue and not just take what Claude proposes at face value. That goes to your point of having a human in the loop. So, for instance, one thing that I'm doing right now is we're trying to agentify a big portion of our performance marketing. Superhuman, formerly known as Grammarly, has a long, long legacy of doing good, effective performance marketing at scale, right? In the many, 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 many millions of dollars across, all parts of the funnel, et cetera. Phenomenal team, phenomenal track record. And which, by the way, is a little bit of a double-edged sword, right? You got really, really good at things. You also have a lot on the line, right? And so agentifying that process, agentifying that entire growth engine is non-trivial, right? And in some ways, you almost would have an advantage starting from scratch, right? And so what we're doing, right, is we are taking folks either internally or externally, right? They're not trivial to find, right? But these are people who have done the thing in traditional ways, right? They understand the mechanics. They understand what's happening under the hood. They are obviously curious, first principles thinkers, yada, yada, yada. But they're also just shown an incredible curiosity, and they will spend their weekends, days, and nights inside of these AI tools. You don't need to tell them. This is something that you have to be able to observe with these folks, right? And look, there are just some people who are like drawn to tinkering, right? So find those folks at the intersection of they know the craft and they're also just really drawn to new technology and they're just like spending days and nights tinkering with this stuff. Put them in a role where tinkering is the job, where tinkering is the job, right? Because when you take folks, as I said before, like, look, don't get me wrong, some of the innovation can happen that way as well, right? But where it's like, hey, you're managing our 10 million meta budget. Fantastic. Hit all of your goals and also agentify what you do. That is just like really difficult to
Yeah.
balance,
Yeah.
right? So you should be encouraging all of your operators to do that, right? It's kind of like the hub and spoke model. But at the same time, can you create these kind of AI labs, right? These sort of sandboxes where you
like a
can put
mini
folks and say,
mini
your
AI
job is to
lab
tinker.
for each function.
I don't know if it's for each function, right? But at a minimum, for the functions where you just see that we have a high degree of confidence that AI can bring a step function change, right? Where there's a real dollar amount that you can attribute to getting better outcomes, right? Start there. It's kind of like the Google, what was the Google, the 10% of your time or the 20% of your time,
Yeah.
right? Where it's like, I mean, it's a similar premise.
And what about, let's say, for teams that are thinking of, and I'm having these conversations almost on like a daily basis with multiple different founders, and they're like, we have, let's say, a half a million to spend on marketing within 2 quarters to hit a certain growth goal. Now, the traditional growth playbook was, yeah, put it all in performance marketing. So you know how many dollars are going in and how many dollars are coming out. But and then the other element attached to that is, okay, I can do performance marketing and I can get results out of it, and that's quantifiable. But what about an outlier outcome if that is also on the spectrum where I do
Like finding
things.
alpha, basically.
Yeah, finding alpha from a branding perspective, from an owned media perspective, from a brand marketing perspective in general, to hit that certain goal. But it just seems to be more unquantifiable. However, if you can build a solid brand, I mean, heck, no performance marketing can give you the kind of results that can give. With all of the money that is being spent on performance marketing, are you still telling founders and growth leaders, hey, take your money, put it in performance marketing, optimize the efficiency and maximize the output using AI? Or are you saying that's great and you should do that, but you should also look at how you can leverage brand and more organic stuff to hit the same growth goal, because that can actually give you an outlier outcome?
It's definitely more of the latter. It's definitely more of the latter. But I also believe that companies need to lean into their strengths. Like my strong point of view is that any technology can just existing strengths versus make a non-strength a strength. That's my opinion. So how like applying it to your question. If you have a charismatic, what's the other word I'm looking for? A charismatic, contrarian thinking founder, amplify the shit out of their brand. Sorry, I don't know if I can swear on this podcast,
Go right
but
ahead. Go right ahead.
right, and how can you use AI to get them out there more, to get, a little bit more scientific about what messages resonate, right, etc. Like, absolutely do that, right? If you have a founder who is not built that way, I don't think it's going to be a good use of time of kind of like, I mean, you should do a little bit of that or a moderate amount of that. But I don't think that you're going to sort of convince the world that you have that type of founder, for instance, right? But founder led social media is like a really powerful a growth motion and growth loop today, like for sure, right? But personally, like I don't know that I would be that kind of founder if I were, like I'm built a little bit differently. So that's A. I think with performance marketing, what I would say, especially for early stage companies, honestly, is the approach that I would take is kind of like I would first ask, okay, like are we building something for which there is already existing demand, right? Because as an early stage company, it's very different, like spending money on, I don't know, YouTube or billboards versus spending money on paid search, right? And you only spend money on paid search if there are demand capture opportunities, people are already searching for what you do. And if you're building something for which there is already demand capture opportunities, it's almost like irresponsible not to deploy money there, right? Because especially if you feel like you have some type of technology advantage where, you can launch AI native workflows, like I would do it. But I don't know that I would go after kind of, top of funnel brand.
Yeah, no, I think you can't do that. Like it's almost, especially if your product is not in the place that it needs to be in, where can build you can build conversion, you can build retention, you have a clean acquisition loop. Until and unless those pieces are solved, I mean, you can do all the founder marketing all day, all night long. But if your product's not there, it's just not there. What I was curious to know, as an ancillary to that, is what about product moats? Because it seems like, and more so on a daily basis, like we're shooting this on Riverside. If you go to Descript or you go to some other competitive platform that can do the exact same thing, it almost feels like product moats aren't a thing anymore. And it's like both products are technically doing the exact same thing. And even if they aren't, it's not going to take a long while for somebody to just ship the features that you're shipping within a week's time, right? So, in terms of like product moats, what are your thoughts around that, especially from both a retention perspective, but also even from a conversion and acquisition perspective? Like, do you still feel like product moats exist, or do you feel like they've been commoditized away?
Honestly, I don't know. I think in a way, maybe my unconventional take, because traditionally we would say what would like an absence of a product mode means that there are basically like lower costs of switching, right? But to switch, it's not just the cost that the cost of switching need to be low. There also needs to be an obvious benefit to switching, right? Both have to be have to hold true. So in a way, as products iterate toward kind of complete parity, yes, the cost of switching goes down. But is it possibly that the benefit of switching is also unobvious? Right? I know that's not a very inspiring, like let's say Descript mirrors Riverside one for one, right? And you're looking and saying, and the cost of switching is like, let's say negligible. You also have to ask yourself, what's the benefit of switching? Because the cost of switching is not going to be zero, right? It may be lower than it was before, but it's not going to be zero, right? That's the uninspiring part of the answer. That has feature commoditization, right? And the race to parity, is kind of accelerates. We're dealing with that kind of dynamic, almost like a paradoxical dynamic, right? Cost of switching goes down, but also the benefit of switching may not be as obvious, right? Especially with all the connectors, and you're able to kind of like like connect all the same data sources everywhere. So I think the moat that I think is going to be difficult to replicate is product delight, is building true, and that's human. That's not machine, right? We talk about something that only people can bring to the table is human taste, right? And building truly delightful experiences that are not gonna come up in your data. Yeah, you're going to try to proxy it with your NPS scoring and your retention curves and et cetera, right? But like and it's building truly delightful product experiences, fast, intuitive, those that tap into user psychology, that tap into people's sense of identity, right? How does this product make me feel when I use it, right? Like when you're using Riverside, you don't need to. I don't know why we're picking on Riverside because the logo is right there, right? And you don't have to answer that, right? If you don't, like when you use Riverside, does it make you feel however it is that you want to feel, right? I don't know, like, we don't know each other well enough, right? Does it make you feel like a Lex Friedman, right? Or whoever it is that you look up to, in your world, right? So I think that is where the real moat is going to lie.
Sounds a lot like, you're almost looking for a combination that can trigger strong human emotions. And the reason why I use this platform over any other is whenever I have a complaint, and this is a Riverside plug. I mean, I should be getting paid by them. But I mean, honestly, I
Maybe
do
after this.
agree. Yeah, maybe after this. I think I do agree on product delight. And I also feel like that's where probably going to the last point exactly is if you have delivered on product delight and if you add a brand moat on top of it and then you add a approachable founder on top of that, that's a brilliant cocktail for growth, right? Especially getting people to stick around, that becomes incredible, in terms of the outcomes that it can deliver.
Hmm.
One thing I did want to understand, just going back to the Superhuman example, in terms of the growth of Superhuman and growth of Grammarly, because it almost feels like, you know, it's easy to say, hey, yeah, Chat GPT can do the exact same thing, Grammarly is doing, but it's not that cut and dry and it's not that simple. And it's also, I mean, we're talking about Superhuman. And I want to dive into that, but it's also similar for a lot of different platforms. Like if I had to recommend to somebody to build a website, right, in the easiest way possible to a non-technical person, I might actually be more inclined to tell them, hey, use Squarespace or Wix rather than using Lovable. Because, like, yes, it's easy to to get an output, but it might not be, from a taste perspective, might not be what you want. And then you're spending, like, God knows how much money I've spent on Lovable to get
Hmm.
outputs that I really want. Whereas with another no code solution like a Squarespace, it's going to be much, much easier. Is that like a general thing that you see in Superhuman and also like other companies that
Mm.
you've advised that are in like a similar, space where they're also facing the challenges of AI, but
Yeah.
people are more inclined to stick
Yeah.
with them?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So I think I know what you mean. So like, look. So LLMs are general purpose technologies, right? It's all of human knowledge ever synthesized for any possible use case, right? And something like Grammarly, right, is you know spent 17 years specifically focused on improving written communication, right? And not just on the underpinning technology of what type of suggestions to offer, right? But also on studying how people work, right? Like, and how to integrate most seamlessly into their workflows, right? And with a general purpose LLM, they're making a lot of decisions for you, right? They're saying, you're going to interact with us in the following format, right? Here's a prompt box, right? You can attach, you can link, you can copy and paste, and then we're going to give you suggestions. If you like it, great. If not, you can ask us to redo it. We'll redo it. Oh, and by the way, when we redo it, we may redo something else more than what you just asked for. Right? Tough luck. And by the way, you don't like the fact that you have to switch contexts, right? From one window or application to the next, right? Going back and forth. Well, sorry, this is we are general purpose. It's in the name, right? We are general purpose, right? So I do think that there is something to be said for using. I mean, yeah, sure. Grammarly uses LLMs. Grammarly also uses a lot of our proprietary models, right? Or same thing for Superhuman, right? Grammarly is an agent on Superhuman in today's kind of in our product portfolio and brand architecture world, right? Sure, a lot of the technology, underpinning ChatGPT, Gemini and Grammarly, there is overlap for sure, right? But the difference between general purpose and, job to be done specific is lies in the, hey, how do people work and how do we properly integrate and adapt to the way people work, right? So yeah, I mean, I do think now is that an insurmountable moat? Is the question. I don't think it's insurmountable, but it's a matter of focus, right? To get as good as Grammarly is at helping people write more effectively wherever they write in real time, push not pull. You don't have to say, "Hey, Grammarly, help me out." right? Personalized to the way you communicate. And like, is it insurmountable? No, but a company would have to say, oh, we also want to do that. And we want to be
Yeah.
maniacally focused on doing that, right? To create real competition.
Just because you could doesn't mean you should.
Yeah. I mean, actually, and I do want to talk more about Superhuman than about Grammarly, frankly, but I will say in the 17 years, or let's call it in the 15 years that Grammarly was Grammarly, right? And you know, charting its path to, you know, north of $500 million in revenue, 40 million you know, active users. All along that journey, the existential threat of a Google and a Microsoft was there, right? It was there. And this is pre LLM. So why did Grammarly succeed the way it has? Is it that Google and Microsoft didn't have the technical chops or the technical talent or whatnot? They also had grammar checking capabilities inside of their, you know, walled garden platforms. It was focus. It was focus, and it was saying like, this is right. Like they try to do a lot more. You know, they were you know, a workspace, a professional, like a knowledge worker workspace that also happened to do some grammar checking, right? Or a word processor in the case of Microsoft Office that happened to have some spell checking and grammar checking features, right? I think the same will carry over, or that is our thesis at least, the same will carry over into the superhuman world, right? What we're doing is not just writing assistants, but kind of like all around, you know, AI work assistants and chief of staff type of value add for every knowledge worker everywhere they work, right? Can Claude, can Perplexity do that? Can OpenAI do that? Can potentially, right? Potentially. And the question is, like, you know, what vector do you choose to kind of get proficient at? Yeah. And the opportunity cost and your time. The opportunity cost and your time. Let's actually, what is the time right now? I'm not wearing my watch, and my phone is my phone is my camera. Let's take, yeah, let's take a couple more minutes. Go ahead. Yeah, I mean, I think there are a few things that a few kind of operating principles that we at Superhuman adhere to that I think should be broadly applicable. Right. I think the first thing is to realize that if you work in tech, you are by definition in a bubble. And that bubble feels something like this. My God, OpenAI and Perplexity are going to eat everyone's lunch, right? Maybe Google, maybe Microsoft, but that's kind of it, right? And what the hell do we build? They're just going to go full stack across the entire value chain, right? And what do we do, right? What can we possibly do? And I think it's important to step out of the bubble from time to time. I don't know, travel, you know, middle America, or even just like, right, like find other ways, like find ways to step out of that bubble, because the reality is that 85% of Americans have neutral to negative views on AI. Okay. Sorry, let me mute this call, Jess. It's why is it calling? I thought I'm on do not. It's weird that it's sorry about that. 85% of Americans have neutral to negative or fearful views on AI, right? And even folks who use AI, they talk about their biggest fears are losing their sense of self, feeling like they're losing control of the output. They're not sure if the ideas are even theirs, et cetera, et cetera. So at least at Superhuman, what we're saying is it's actually kind of in the name, right? We're not we're not building something that will replace you, or that where you lose control of your work or your output, but we're building something that will help you be the best version of yourself, that will help you unlock your superhuman potential. So we're really focusing, as an AI company, we're really focusing on those 85%, right? And how to introduce AI in a way where they still own their work, they have control over the output, and they're directing AI like they would a team, having full control of what you delegate, what you stay in the loop on, what you choose to continue to do yourself. It should be your choice, your human agency, right? So that's the approach that we're taking. But if I am to zoom out, right? And say, like, if you're building a SaaS company, again, focus on areas where you see enough of a variance in sort of willingness to pay is more of a shortcut term, but where you see enough of a variance in value perception, right? Where you can actually build solutions that, in leaning into usage-based billing, outcomes-based pricing, there is enough value to create and realize. I still think domain expertise is really important. So if I see I don't know, a construction loan company, an AI native construction loan company, I want to see that one of the founders has worked in construction, right? Like, I think that is still really important because, again, at the end of the day, AI is your thought partner, it's your sparring partner, but it's not like you need to be able to keep it honest, challenge it, pressure test it along the way. All right. This goes back to the fact that most of the gains, most of the value realized, most of the dollars, most of the 40 billion in Anthropic revenue is shipping code. It's not even building software architecture, right? Because senior software developers and software architects will be the first to tell you it's not good at that just yet. It's not good at that, right? So, like, find an area where you have strong domain expertise. If you're gonna be, you're gonna be building with AI. Make sure you have really strong software architect on the team, right? Who can build with the future in mind, right? And not get run over by the AI telling it how to build, telling them how to build, right? And make sure that there is enough value to capture, because with all the token usage, you're gonna have to do usage-based billing. You're gonna have to do outcomes-based pricing. It's not gonna be flat subscriptions anymore. Make sure there is enough value realization there, right? Enough value capture to be had. That's where I stand on that. Yep. 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 Can I actually? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Can I put a finer point on the prior point that I made? I feel like I could do a better job. Here is I think the pattern that I'm seeing, and I think it's important for folks who are finding themselves in this pattern to be a bit more maybe mindful and aware of the consequences. And the pattern goes something like this. You go, I have a SaaS product. I have several subscription tiers. And then I'm looking at what's happening with obviously the LLM, race to general human intelligence. And I say, oh my God, I can use this to create so much value in my product, right? I can, personalize the product experience. I can personalize the insights. Like, it's just endless opportunities. And also there is this fear, oh my God, if we don't do it, someone else is gonna do it. Let's jump on it, right? And that's why you see the token consumption go through the roof. But a point that Chamath made on the all-in pod probably multiple times, right? Is that, yeah, there is all this token consumption, but but if you look at the company's top line, the ones that are now spending, tens of millions on token costs, has it translated in them making more revenue, right? And the verdict is still very much out on that. And I think the important thing in that pattern is to say, as you think about all the ways that you can increase the value of your product, can you actually capture that value in the form of discriminated price points, right? And that your subscribers or your potential TAM sees that value and is willing to pay those differentiated prices, right? And you have to connect that loop. Otherwise, the increased token costs are not going to translate into increased value capture. And some of it is just going to be, sometimes you're just going to be handicapped either by the market you're in, right? Like, I don't know, like, let's say in your mind, I don't know, a calorie tracking tool. I use a calorie tracking tool for a long time, right? And maybe it costs me $120 a year. Okay, maybe it can get a lot smarter in recommending different foods, in whatever, because on the back end, their team is just leveraging AI a lot more and better. But what is my peak willingness to pay for this consumer subscription calorie tracker, right? Maybe I'm already at that peak, right? And maybe there is already a ceiling that's kind of established just by the category itself. So that's something I would urge founders to be mindful around as they founders and operators, as they race to, you know, eat up all of the tokens that they can for fear of their competitors doing the same. Exactly. And by the way, the subsidies are about to end once the two go public, right? Yeah. Yeah. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me, Arnav. Riverside, are you hearing this? All right. Well, I'll wait for you to. I want to make sure. Are you sure? I don't want to break anything. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. All right, man.